Hey guys, I'm Shayda Campbell and today's tutorial is a viewer request. I'm going to be showing you how to illustrate and then paint watercolor winter birds. So we're going to do chickadees, robins, cardinals. It's going to be wintry, Christmassy, and really pretty. So let's get started. Here's a real quick rundown of today's supplies. To do the bird illustrations, I'm using just a nice artist sketchbook, and I'm using an HB and a 2B pencil. Get yourself some good pencils if you don't have some already. Treat yourself. I'm going to link some pencils in the description below. And then when I go to do the watercolor, I am using this really good set of watercolor discs from Fine Tech. This is just something I picked up, I think because I was in an art store and I just wanted to buy something, but now I use them all the time and I just love them. So I'm going to link that in the description below as well. So the idea of drawing birds or doing watercolor birds was also really new to me. They're not something that I've ever tackled before. And anytime I'm going to draw or paint something totally new, what I'll do is I'll just get out my sketchbook and I'll just try drawing this thing, whatever it is, whether it's a bird or a hand. And what I've done here is just drawn different birds like a sparrow and a cardinal and a chickadee, and I've done them all, not just different birds, but in different positions. So the cardinal is sort of in side profile, and the robin on the top left there is sort of glancing back behind him. But I'm just trying to draw birds, trying to get the coloring right. You can see the chickadee and the cardinal have their coloring there. That makes them so iconic. And then I'm also just trying to get the look of a bird right, because birds are sort of funny. They've got these big breasts and tiny heads, and I think mine have gone slightly towards the cartoony, very chubby side, and I'm okay with that. That's my style. So now let's take a look here at how I would illustrate a bird. I've just got a pencil on graph paper, and I'm going to do the robin. And I always just start by sort of sketching the shape of the body. So I'm going to go over this in pen so you can really see. But start out with the shape of the bird's body, and this bird has this sort of almost egg-shaped body with a wing on the side. So you're going to start with a bit of an egg shape, wing on the side, and then the tail on an angle at the back. When you're ready to do the beak and the eye, this is a tricky part. The beak, you're just going to place off to the side there, going towards that tail. And then when you do the eye, just try to do a dot and see if that dot looks like it's in the right place. And if it does, then you can go beyond and sort of draw in the look of a bird's eye. And I'll just sort of shade in where I'm going to color, where I'm going to add the dark brown on that robin, and then I'll move on. So let's do the chickadee next. And here again, you can just see I'm just sketching out where's his breast, where's his little head, his wing. And then once I'm sort of happy with the shape, then I'll go over it in pen. And I'll start adding in some of his features like feet, and I'll add some of the coloring and sort of practice. Okay, this is what the coloring of a chickadee looks like. And the more you sketch and the more you practice, the easier you're going to find it when you go to do the watercolor, because paint is a whole nother kettle of fish. So practice on paper first and get comfortable with it. Then once you do have a sketch that you're proud of, you can see here, you can grab some tracing paper, and you're going to trace over the sketch that you're happy with in order to sort of extract that sketch and get it ready for painting. The one thing I did want to show you here is that once you're happy with the sort of a look of a bird and you're sort of happy with the forms that you've drawn, then you're able to change them. So this robin, I'm tracing it and I'm going to go over it and try to make it into a cardinal. So I want to use this shape of a bird for my painting, say, but I'm going to try to give him that little funny haircut that the cardinal has. I'm also thickening up his beak, and then I'm going to add the coloring that makes the cardinal so iconic. So I don't know, this kind of looks a little bit like a rooster, but I think you could work with it in order to make it into a cardinal. So say you wanted to do that Christmassy cardinal who's sitting in the tree. Well, there, now you've got it. So once you've sketched a few different forms, you can play around with them and use them to your advantage. Now let's move on to the painting part of these birds because that's what's really fun. So I've got my trace here of my little robin. I've got a piece of cold pressed watercolor paper and a little piece of graphite transfer paper. Of course, you can always rub a little pencil on the back of your tracing paper if you don't have the transfer paper. And I've got that transfer paper dark side down, and I'm just got a nice sharp pencil here, and I'm going over the entire drawing, not adding a ton of detail, just because I don't want too many lines coming through my watercolor. So I'll remove that from the page, and you can see I've got a nice light transfer there. And now we're ready to paint. So we're going to do a new technique today, and this technique is even quite new to me. Not new, but it's not one that I employ often, and it is a watercolor technique called wet on wet. And what that means is we're going to get the page wet before we start painting. So you can see here I've got a nice large soft brush, and I'm applying lots of water to the page. I've pretty much got it puddle wet, at least in some spots, and I've just colored in the entirety of the bird with clear water. Now the reason that I want to do this is because wet on wet gives this very beautiful natural feathering technique. And there we go. So I've got my brown, a cool brown mixed up, and you can see as I apply it to that water, it just sort of feathers out and runs away from me, and it's a little bit out of control, but that's what I want. Well, it's the look that I want, and I'm giving up that control, and I'm okay with it, as I'm sure you can tell. Totally okay with that loss of control. You know what's funny is even when I don't do a wet on wet, it's not like I'm perfect. I always go a little too far, and I'm like, you need to do less is more, pull back. So it's kind of funny to give up the control, because it really is all about, you know, allowing the medium to do what it does best, and that's give these beautiful watery, feathery spots. And when you go to add in more color, you can add different colors on top of your paint in wet on wet. And you'll get some great textures and sort of some great dotting and stuff. So I really do recommend that you play around with it. And remember, it's supposed to be fun. It's not all about getting it right, as I am learning with these wet on wet watercolor birds. Now, as you watch me add the red to the robin's breast, I think you get a really good look at what the wet on wet technique can do, because you'll notice the red towards the robin's head, it sort of naturally and beautifully blends with the brown. And then the red towards the robin's breast, it really blends really nicely into the cream of the page, and you get this very natural feathering that just looks like the bird itself. And don't forget, if you use a little too much paint or there's too much going on, you can always have a dry paintbrush handy to sort of erase and pull back some of that color. And as I'm painting here, I'll just remind you guys to hit the subscribe button. I put out a new tutorial every Friday. It's always lettering, art, crafty goodness, so you don't want to miss one. And I'm finishing up the eye and the beak by adding a very opaque bit of black watercolor, and just be sure to leave a highlight in the eye. That's really what brings the bird to life. And then when the painting is done, just set it to the side and allow it to dry. And we're going to move on and paint our little chickadee. This one's really fun because he's got quite a unique, intense coloring with the black and white and yellow. So I've got my transferred image, or my transferred drawing on watercolor. This is what his coloring looks like in my sketch. So a lot of black with a bit of white right around or right under the eye. And I'm going to do wet on wet again. I'm going to try it. So I've got my nice big soft brush, adding lots of water. I did try to leave out the area where that white bit is around his eye, because remember, the paint will not go anywhere where the page isn't wet. So you don't have to worry about it bleeding all over the page. And here we are. I've got a very nice dark black watercolor mixed up. And I'm just adding it, and you can see right away how it starts feathering out. It really gives a very natural look to that bird's coloring, and I'm just trying to go with that. And I'm just going to speed the video up a little bit here, and you can just get a good look at me, trying out the wet on wet technique. As I said, it gives this beautiful feathering and gorgeous, very translucent, interesting texture that's perfect for the feathers and the coloring of a bird. It's also just kind of a crazy technique, and you can see me here like, it's the breast is getting too dark and I'm trying to erase, and basically I'm trying to get back control instead of just letting go, which is what I need to do. And when you are painting wet on wet, you want to give up that loss of control and allow the paint to sort of go where it wants. At the same time, you want to be aware still of what area you're painting. So, for example, on the tail, I'm still trying to give the look of these straight down feathers. So I'm not just going to throw black on there and allow it to feather out like on the breast. I'm still going to try to get a little bit of definition between the tail feathers. And here I'm just adding a little bit of cool yellowy brown to the breast, and trying to allow that to naturally blend into the gray, and I think it's looking pretty good. And now you can also really see where I didn't put water around the eye there. And again, anywhere that the page is not wet, the paint will not go unless you really have a ton of water and paint on there. It's not going to go out of the puddle that you've set up. So don't fear. And I'm just adding a little bit more definition to the black bits of the chickadee here. And then I'm going to finish up his breast by adding just a little bit of the sort of purpley blue color here. And that's just sort of helping the black to blend into the gray. And give him a little more definition. And then finally I need to tackle the area around his eye, and I've sort of purposely left it for the end because it's going to be a little bit finicky, but I've just got, again, a very saturated, almost opaque black watercolor, and I'm just drawing with a very fine tip brush. I'm painting in his eye and making sure to leave a highlight. And I've got that nice bright white negative space around the eye. And I think that really makes him look like a chickadee. Now, one more point. The craziness of wet on wet aside, there is one good piece of good news, and that's that you still can work a bit of wet on dry. Once the wet on wet has dried, of course, you can go back in and layer in some more color. So I'm just adding a bit of darker brown to the robin's wing and to his tail, and even a little bit of red on his breast. So you can kind of work a couple techniques, and I think on the birds that works out really well in the end. And here you see me doing that on the chickadee, just adding some details after he's all dry, and of course giving him some little feet as well. And then once I had that chickadee all done, I decided I think I will add just some evergreen sprigs in to sort of make that part of the video as well, because I know you guys want to use these for Christmas cards and sort of wintry things, wintry paintings. So I just sketched in pencil where I wanted the branches to be placed. And then I mixed up a cool muted green with my watercolor. And I'm just going in with a number 3 round brush. So something quite fine, and I'm just sort of doing these evergreen sprigs where I'm trying to give a little bit of detail to the evergreen, but not a ton of detail. And you can see that there. Some of the sprigs are quite defined, and others are just sort of this watery blob, and I'm okay with that. And just going in fairly faint and then adding a little bit of a darker green really makes that evergreen pop, sort of brings it to life, as I always say. And as I add those evergreen sprigs in, I'm still thinking about leaving a lot of negative space on the page, and I think you can see that. Even with the evergreen, even though it looks like the little chickadees in a tree, there's still lots of blank space, and giving your image some room, allowing that negative space into the piece is really going to elevate it and make it so much more sophisticated. And then right at the end here, I decided I would like there to just be a little bit of blue of the sky. Normally I would do this first, but it's not impossible to put it in at the end. So I'm doing wet on wet here with just a little bit of blue, still leaving lots of negative space. And as I often do, I waited till my painting was dry, and then I took my artist pen, my Pigma Micron from Sakura, and I just added that sketchy black line to a few of these paintings, and I just love that look. I will link those pens in the description below as well. The robin in the wreath, I didn't add any lines, so that one's just watercolor, and I think it looks equally pretty. And that's everything for this week. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to subscribe. Also hit the like button. Leave me a comment. Comment about anything, what you liked, what you didn't like, and what you want to see next week. And I will see you next Friday with a new tutorial.